initiatives that have what? Lowered our scores. Oh. So here's one conspiracy theory. Yale wasn't going to be number one anymore. This is so funny to me. Yale wasn't going to be number one anymore. And so they're quitting this list. This is what I had to get away from, y'all. I had to get out of this clown world. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. How are you doing on this fine Thursday? I'm doing quite well. If this is your first time on the channel, I am a lawyer, but I'm not currently practicing. And I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania Law School in 2020. Today, I wanted to talk about the scandalous news that just broke yesterday, that Yale and Harvard's law schools no longer want to be ranked on the US News and World Report list. Now, for some of y'all, this is going to be like, who cares? But for some of y'all that are watching this and you know this niche group of people I'm talking to right now, how scandalous and earth-shattering this is for the entire legal academia space. I mean, back in like 2015, 2016, when I was deciding which law schools to apply to, there was so much emphasis put on what the law school's ranking was. It's how you calculate the whole thing. For example, I used to go on these like Reddit threads, right? And on the Reddit threads, people would be talking about like how much scholarship money that they could negotiate with schools for, or which schools to actually apply to, or which school to choose to attend. And it's not just the very beginning, right? It's not just before you apply to law school that these rankings are important. I mean, I remember being in law school and I had this one particular friend, Mike, and all 3 years we were in law school, it was like he was celebrating our rank as a school. And I was celebrating it too, because when you get into an institution that is like Ivy League or is like ranked really high, it makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you are a part of an elite group of people and like only certain people can do it. It feels good. It feels good. So of course, there's all kinds of different lists and ranking lists that a school might find themselves on. But the most important one, everyone would agree, is the US News and World Report rankings. Now, who is that by? I guess I should do a little investigation into like who owns that and who's running it and all of that. But suffice it to say that basically, since the publication started doing law school rankings, Yale has been number one. I mean, maybe they were number two here or there, but I really think that they've been number one the whole time that these rankings have been going on. Let me see when they started. So according to Wikipedia, US News published its first attempt at ranking US law schools in 1987 and has released annual rankings beginning in 1990. And as you can see, the front page, when you type in when did US News start ranking law schools, you can see there's all these news articles about Yale and Harvard. Basically, these US News and World Report rankings will follow you throughout your entire legal career. Now, there's certain schools that frankly, they don't need to be ranked. I think any law school that can call itself within the Ivy League, it just sounds prestigious. It just is prestigious. And so I don't think they really need to be ranked. But for a lot of schools, NYU, for example, who would know that they were like such a good, high achieving law school if they weren't always in the top 5 or top 10 law schools in the country? I mean, I wouldn't know. NYU, like, okay, maybe like, how do you know which schools are good other than the Ivy League ones without these rankings, right? Now, conceivably, like philosophically, theoretically, any accredited law school should be good because any accredited law school, you can take the bar and go to practice law. But there's all kinds of stuff going on with these rankings. Now, I know like most people don't really care about this. And to be honest, I have made choices in my life to remove myself from being a member of groups that have to care about this. But it is so funny to me to watch this whole thing flip on its head. And there's all these people that are so concerned about it. I'm sure hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars are about to be spent in PR and all this stuff on this. I definitely think there's a lot more going on behind the scenes that we have no idea about. But I just wanted to do a tiny little investigation today, kind of report on the news that this happened. And I want to read Yale Law School's dean's statement and see if we can read between the lines as to what might actually be going on. Now, for the purposes of this video, this is just my speculation. This is just my opinion, commentary, maybe a little bit of jokes here and there. I have no inside knowledge about any of this stuff. I just know how big of a deal it is that the school that's been number one over and over, and the school Harvard that's been number two basically over and over and over since the beginning of time as well, are both all of a sudden not wanting to be a part of these rankings. I just want to put one more thing out there. It is very funny to me that this is news at all, because how are you going to remove yourself from being ranked? Let's say it was like That Surprise Witness TV ranks the best law schools in the country, and I wanted to put like Yale or Harvard on it. Like, how are they going to tell me I can't put them on my ranking? You know what I mean? I'm sure that the schools do have to participate to be ranked. Like, they have to tell the US News and World Report how they make certain decisions and stuff like that. I'm sure there is some level of participation involved on the part of the schools. So maybe Yale and Harvard are just saying, we're not going to participate and tell you how we do this stuff anymore. But I'm very curious to know what's truly going on behind the scenes, because a lot of times whenever big scandals happen like this, what's put out in PR is like maybe technically true, but it's like, there's a lot more going on behind the scenes we maybe don't know about. So let's look together at what the dean of Yale Law School has said. This was posted yesterday on law.yale.edu. This is the article. It says, Dean Gherkin, why Yale Law School is leaving the US News and World Report rankings. And again, y'all, I think it's hilarious that they're leaving the rankings. Like, how do you leave a ranking list? Like, if somebody wants to put you on the list, how are you going to leave the ranking list? Do y'all see what I'm saying? Like, hi, I'm the dean of Yale and I don't consent to being ranked. Like, huh? Does Yale realize that that's their whole model? Ranking people and deciding who to let into their school? Like, they don't want to be ranked. Oh, okay, they don't want to be ranked. I mean, I agree with them. Like, I don't want to be ranked either, but I don't know. It's just so funny. It's like, oh, we're leaving the rankings list. Like, it kind of gives you a little insight into how these rankings lists really work, right? Like, conceivably, based on what Yale and Harvard are now saying, have to consent to be on the ranking list, have to somehow comply in some way to be on the ranking list. I don't know. I haven't read this full statement. I started reading it and I was like, let me just read this with everybody. Okay. So Yale Law School Dean Heather K. Gherkin has issued the following statement on US News and World Report rankings. Okay. What'd she say? For 3 decades. Oh my God. That's true. 1990 was 3 decades ago. For 3 decades, U.S. News and World Report, a for-profit magazine, has ranked the educational quality of law schools across the country. Since the very beginning, Yale Law School has taken the top spot every year. Yet, that distinction is not one that we advertise or use as a lodestar to chart our course. In fact, in recent years, we have invested significant energy and capital, that means money, in important initiatives that make our law school a better place, but perversely, oh, here we go. This is what made me make the video, this sentence right here. Perversely work to lower our scores. Do y'all see what's maybe going on behind the scenes a little bit? In recent years, we have invested energy and money into initiatives that have what? Lowered our scores. Oh. So here's one conspiracy theory. Yale wasn't going to be number one anymore. This is so funny to me. Yale wasn't going to be number one anymore. And so they're quitting this list. This is what I had to get away from, y'all. I had to get out of this clown world. Okay. That's because, why? Tell us, Yale. That's because US News rankings are profoundly flawed. They disincentivize programs that support public interest careers, champion need-based aid, and welcome working class students into the profession. Well, I will tell you one thing. I did not go to Yale. I do have a couple of friends who did. I did not feel welcomed as a working class student into the profession. And in fact, I have now quit the profession. So y'all sorted out how welcomed I felt in this profession. Okay. But that's not Yale's fault. Yale has nothing to do with me. I have nothing to do with Yale at all. I know 1 or 2 people who went to Yale, and that's about it. But just in the first paragraph, we can kind of see what might be going on behind the scenes. In recent years, certain initiatives that Yale has taken at their law school has lowered its scores, okay? And Yale's argument is that the US news rankings are profoundly flawed. Why are they flawed? According to Yale's dean, is that the rankings disincentivize public interest and public service and need based aid and working class students joining the profession. We have reached a point where the rankings process is undermining the core commitments of the legal profession. As much as I want to laugh at Yale for giving one shit about this list, I do agree with this from the dean. We have reached a point in the profession where the rankings process undermines the core commitments of the legal profession. I agree with that part. I completely agree with that part. But I would have agreed with that in 2015. So what happened since 2015 that all of a sudden Yale doesn't want to be in the rankings no more? As a result, we will no longer participate. She goes on to say it is entirely understandable that many schools feel compelled to adhere to a commercial magazine's preferences. Woo! Shots fired, Yale. As the rankings are taken seriously by applicants, employers, and alumni. They are taken seriously. But rankings are useful only when they follow sound methodology and confine their metrics to what the data can reasonably capture. Factors the dean says she has described in her own research on election administration. Over the years, however, U.S. News has refused to meet those conditions despite repeated calls from law school deans to change. Instead, the magazine continues to take data, much of it supplied by the law schools solely to U.S. News, and applies a misguided formula that discourages law schools from doing what is best for legal education. So again, these are all just the dean's allegations. I will look after this to see if US News and World Report has made a response yet. This all happened yesterday. The dean in her statement goes on to say, while I sincerely believe that US News operates with the best of intentions, it faces a nearly impossible task, ranking 192 law schools with a small set of one-size-fits-all metrics that cannot provide an accurate picture of such varied institutions. That's true. That is true. It can't. There's no way. Why you want to go to law school differs from person to person. What you need from a law school differs from applicant to applicant. And so it really is kind of silly that we put them all on one list. Like, it just is kind of silly. To be fair, on the other hand, I do understand the need or the impulse or the desire to kind of put them all on one list because you do want to be able to compare. Conceivably, if an applicant can go to any law school that is accredited and take a bar exam and practice law, then they should be able to be compared against each other. But y'all see just firsthand how many different ways there are to use a law license. And so I would agree again with Yale's Dean Gherkin on this particular statement. She goes on to say that U.S. News's approach not only fails to advance the legal profession, but actually stands squarely in the way of progress. Now, I don't know what progress Dean Gherkin wants, but that is something that she has said. One of the most troubling aspects of the U.S. News rankings is that it discourages law schools from providing critical support for students seeking public interest careers and devalues graduates pursuing advanced degrees. Okay, so I don't know about this first allegation, but the devalues graduates pursuing advanced degrees, I think, has to do with job placement. US News and World Report will give you more points if you have more students getting a job right out of graduation. If you think about Yale and Harvard specifically, they are considered within the legal academia world to be a little bit more academic and a little bit less job placement focused, such that people will go after law school to get a PhD or a master's degree or an advanced legal degree. And according to the dean of Yale, that job placement metric is affecting their rankings because more of their students don't go straight to work. They go to more school. So I don't know. I would have to really dig into the analytics on that, but that's what she seems to be implying. Because service is a touchstone of our profession, Yale is proud to award many more public interest fellowships per student than any of our peers. These fellowships have enabled some of our finest students to serve their communities and the nation on Yale's dime. Even though our fellowships are highly selective and pay comparable salaries to outside fellowships, US News appears to discount these invaluable opportunities to such an extent that these graduates are effectively classified as unemployed. So it does have to do with the job placement numbers. When it comes to brilliant students training themselves for a scholarly life, who wrote this? Or a wide ranging career by pursuing coveted PhD and master's degrees, US News does the same. Both of these tracks are a venerable tradition at Yale, like I told y'all, and these career choices should be valued and encouraged throughout legal education. I agree. It shouldn't be just like, oh, capitalism, like who got a job, how much are they getting paid, highest paid gets ranked the highest. But like Yale didn't have any problem with any of this when they were being ranked number one. But now that their scores are being perversely lowered, now all of a sudden they want to kick and scream and yell about it. But like, hasn't this always been going on? But whatever, better late than never. I am glad they're taking a stand and they're making some type of statement on it. Again, I'm not trying to be like, oh, let's rally around Yale, because this is very one-sided. It is biased. It is coming from only Yale, and we're going to look and see if we can find something coming from US News. She goes on to say, in addition, the rankings exclude a crucial form of support for public interest careers, loan forgiveness programs, when calculating student debt loads. Okay, hold on. Oh, okay, I see. Okay, so they're basically saying US News and World Report does not take into consideration loan forgiveness programs whenever they're calculating the student debt of each student, because that's another metric that US News and World Reports uses. They rank your law school partially based on how much debt each student has when they leave. The rankings exclude them when calculating debt, even though they can entirely erase a student's loans. But okay, just because they can, Dean Gerken, do they? And I would like to see some data here. They can erase a student's loans, but she doesn't say, 50% of student loans are, reduced or whatever. It's like, okay, but just because it can reduce doesn't mean it necessarily does. And maybe US News is taking into account actual debt already. We don't know. I would need to see the rankings. A big problem that has always been kind of like shrouded in mystery. So we don't really know as the public exactly what is weighed and stuff like that, as far as I understand. Maybe we do, but I don't think we do. I think it's just like some obscure, weird algorithm thing. In short, when law schools devote resources to encouraging students to pursue public interest careers, US News mischaracterizes them as low employment schools with high debt loads, resulting in Yale's ranking going down from number one, is the between the lines that I'm reading. That backward approach discourages law schools throughout the country from supporting students who dream of a service career. Well, they should get on LawTube, you know what I mean? The US News rankings also discourage law schools from admitting and providing aid to students with enormous promise who come from modest means. Present. Today, 20% of a law school's overall ranking is median LSAT GRE scores and GPAs. While academic scores are an important tool, they don't always capture the full measure of an applicant. This heavily weighted metric imposes tremendous pressure on schools to overlook promising students, especially those who cannot afford expensive test preparation courses. Okay, hold on a second. This is coming from the school that charges like $60,000 a year for tuition. So as much as I really want to agree with this, like, oh, we care so much about poor people thing, like they could also help poor people out by just not charging $60,000 a year for people to go there. It's like, if it's good for the goose, Yale, it got to be good for the gander. Like you're charging people 60 grand a year to go to your school, and now you're mad that the US News and World Report is somehow discriminating against poor people. But it's kind of like, you can't talk out both sides of your mouth, Dean Gerken. It also pushes schools to use financial aid to recruit high scoring students. As a result, millions of dollars of scholarship money now go to students with the highest scores, not the greatest need. That is a problem. That is a big problem I see. At a moment when concerns about economic equity stand at the center of our national dialogue, only 2 law schools in the country continue to give aid based entirely on need: Harvard and Yale. Just this year, Yale doubled down on that commitment, launching a tuition-free scholarship for students who come from families below the poverty line. Oh my God. Y'all, Yale was my number one choice of school. I really wanted to go there, but I could not afford to apply. It was, I think, $60 to apply there. It's the number one law school, right? And the acceptance rate was like 10 or 15%. I'd already applied to a lot of the schools in the top 10, and I just simply couldn't afford it. I simply could not afford it because it wasn't just $60 you had to pay to Yale. You had to also pay $35 to the LSAC, who we're going to be doing an investigation on. Don't you worry. The LSAC, who's the administrator of the LSAT, the law school admission test. So it would have been like 60, 70, $95 I was paying rent. I just couldn't afford it. So it's very funny to see like Yale being like, oh, we really want people below the poverty line. Like I was far below the poverty line and I could not get an application fee waiver from Yale. And it was like I had to do a cost benefit analysis. What's the cost? $95 plus the benefit. Maybe a 5% chance of even being considered to go to Yale. I never even applied because it was simply too expensive. So while I do agree with Dean Gerken and her analysis of how difficult it is for high achieving, promising, poor people to apply to law school and to get in, I also would like to offer her a good faith criticism that I am such a student who did not even apply to the school because I could not get a fee waiver. So I would just offer that up as a little bit of context for Dean Gerken if this is something that she truly is interested in rectifying and mitigating. I did apply to Harvard and it was my one law school rejection, and it kind of made me feel like probably the Yale decision was a good one. It's not just money, right? You have to put together an entire package, all that stuff. Okay. So then she says, these students overcame nearly insurmountable odds to get to Yale, and their stories are nothing short of inspiring. Regrettably, US News had made it difficult for other law schools to eliminate the financial barriers that deter talented minds from joining our profession. Okay, hold on. But Dean Gerken, y'all did this to me. US News made it difficult for eliminating the financial barriers that deter talented minds from joining our profession, but your fees that you charged to apply to the school deterred me from applying to your school. So that had nothing to do with US News. Just so we're all clear. And finally, the way US News accounts for student debt further undercuts the efforts of law schools to recruit the most capable students into the profession. To its credit, US News has recognized that debt can deter excellent students from becoming lawyers and has tried to help by giving weight to a metric that rests on the average debt of graduating students and the percentage of students who graduate with debt. But a metric based on debt alone can backfire, and it incentivizes schools to admit students with the means to pay tuition over students with substantial financial need. A far better measure is how much financial aid a law school provides to its students, rewarding schools that admit students from low-income backgrounds and support them along the way. That crucial measure receives inadequate weight in the rankings, says the dean. She goes on to say, the people most harmed by this ill-conceived system are applicants who aspire to public service work and those from low-income backgrounds. They are trying to make a sensible choice about their future, and law schools want to do right by them. Unfortunately, the ranking system has made it increasingly difficult for law schools to provide a robust support system for students who serve their communities, to admit students from low-income backgrounds, and to target financial aid to the students who actually need it. Yale says, although we will not submit data to US News going forward, each year, Yale will provide prospective students with data in a public, transparent, and useful form to ensure they have the information they need to decide which law school is right for them. Leaders in legal education should do everything they can to ensure students of all backgrounds have the support and resources they need to enter our profession and contribute to society. Granting exclusive access to a flawed commercial ranking system is counterproductive to the mission of this profession and the core values of Yale Law School. While I do not take this decision lightly, now is the time for us to walk away from the rankings in order to pursue our own path forward as we work to advance legal education. Let me see if Harvard made a statement. Oh my God, y'all, it's long. It's a long one. Let me see if it's the same as Yale. Okay. So this came out yesterday, decision to withdraw from the US News and World Report process. Who wrote this? Who's John Manning? So John Manning is the dean of Harvard Law School, and he has written basically an equally long statement, and I'm going to try and get through this one a little faster because we already did Yale. He says, I write today to share with you Harvard will no longer participate in the US News and World Report rankings effective this year. We at HLS have made the decision because it has become impossible to reconcile our principles and commitments with the methodology and incentives the U.S. News rankings reflect. This decision was not made lightly and only after considerable deliberation over the past several months. Done well, such rankings could convey accurate, relevant information about universities, colleges, and graduate and professional schools that may help students and families make informed choices about which schools best meet their needs. However, rankings can also emphasize characteristics that potentially mislead those who rely on them and can create perverse incentives. Again, we have perverse incentives again. So I think maybe Dean Manning and Dean Gherkin might have gotten their stories together before releasing these public statements. I don't know. That's just speculation. These perverse incentives that influence schools' decisions in ways that undercut student choice and harm the interests of potential students. Over several years now, a number of schools, including Harvard, have brought to the attention of U.S. News, either directly or through the U.S. News Law Deans Advisory Board. What in the hell kind of club is that? The concerns that have motivated us to end our participation in the U.S. News process. In particular, we have raised concerns about aspects of the ranking methodology that work against law schools' commitment to enhancing the socioeconomic diversity of our classes, to allocating financial aid to students based on need, and through loan repayment and public interest fellowships to supporting graduates interested in careers in the public interest. First, the debt metric adopted by U.S. News 2 years ago. Okay, we got another little hint here, y'all. 2 years ago, they changed the rankings. Risks confusing more than it informs, because a school may lower debt at graduation through generous financial aid. But it may also achieve the same effect by admitting more students who have the resources to avoid borrowing. This debt metric gives prospective students no way to tell which is which. And to the extent the debt metric creates an incentive for schools to admit better resource students who don't need to borrow, it risks harming those it is trying to help. So this is basically the same thing that Yale was saying. I'm not going to get into it here and re-explain it. It's basically the same thing so far. Second, by heavily weighing students' test scores and college grades, the U.S. News rankings have, over the years, created incentives for law schools to direct more financial aid towards applicants based on their LSAT scores and college GPAs, without any regard to whether they actually need the financial aid. Though Harvard and Yale law schools have each resisted the pull toward so-called merit aid, it has become increasingly prevalent, absorbing scarce resources that could be allocated more directly on the basis of need. Third, the U.S. News methodology undermines the efforts of many law schools to support public interest careers for their graduates. We share and have expressed to U.S. News the concern that their debt metric ignores school-funded loan forgiveness programs and calculating student debt. Such loan forgiveness programs, so another thing that Yale is mad about, so Harvard is also saying they're mad about it. The loan forgiveness programs actually help students who pursue the lower paying jobs, typically in the public interest sector. We have joined other schools in also sharing with U.S. News our concern about the magazine's decision to discount, in the employment ranking, professional positions held by those who receive public interest fellowships funded by their home schools. So basically, Yale and Harvard both, if somebody really wants to be in the public interest, and this is how it worked at my school, at Penn, if somebody really wants to work in public interest, they have things called fellowship. It's like these organizations, sometimes it's big law firms, they basically give you a grant to work on a legal project that usually you wouldn't get paid a lot of money for. Like people go abroad, people go help rural communities, people go back to their own communities, and there's only a very limited amount of those fellowships to go around. And the schools that have a lot of money, the rich schools like Penn, Harvard, Yale, they will create their own school version of a fellowship. So it's like, oh, you want to be in the public interest. We don't want you to look unemployed. So we'll give you a fellowship and then you go work on a project. Well, Yale and Harvard are now saying, well, since we do that, we should be ranked higher because we're showing that we have the money to support our students who do want to go into that type of profession. It's like, if you can't get a fellowship, we will provide you with a fellowship. Harvard and Yale both seem to be upset that the U.S. News and World Report is not giving them credit for having all this money that they allocate in this particular way. These jobs jobs not only provide lawyers to organizations for critical needs, they also often launch a graduate's career in the public sector. For these and other reasons, we will no longer participate in the US news process. This is just so funny. It's like feet stamping. We don't want to. And so, but Harvard is being clear though. They're saying we will not participate in the process. So we're getting a little bit more between the lines here that yes, the schools do participate in the process. They do provide information to US News and how they make decisions and what their percentages of employment and all that are. And Harvard's saying we're not participating in that anymore. Bye. They go on to say it does not advance the best ideals of legal education or the profession we serve. And it contradicts the deeply held commitments of Harvard Law School. So that's what Harvard said, very similar to what Yale said. Now I'm going to look up and see if the US News and World Report has made a statement. Hold on. Okay. I cannot find anything from the US News and World Report magazine itself. I cannot imagine that they're just going to let this go. I feel like they're going to want to get their side of the story out. I also feel like there could be possible lawsuits brewing in the background. I am going to look into like some theories of what people might think really is going on. Maybe some people have a little bit more inside knowledge on the situation. So I'm going to immerse myself in the Reddit threads because I don't know. It's been a long time since I really cared so much about something that affects like the legal profession like this because it's just drama. But you do see this happening in other ways. I mean, Yale and Harvard are basically doing what I did. They're saying, you're not going to tell me what my ranking is. No, you are not. I'm going to rank my damn self and I'm going to tell the people who need to know what they need to know. I'm not submitting all my data and my information so that some for-profit corporate magazine can tell me whether I'm worth a shit or not. No, I'm not doing that. We're not doing that. Yale and Harvard signing off. No. And listen, Yale and Harvard Law School are some of the most powerful institutions in the whole entire world. So it's not like they're like the little guy here. And usually I like to cheer on the little guy. But what I am hoping is that this type of move starts to embolden and encourage the little guy law schools to say, you know what, we don't need to do that either. I do understand why, though. Just like Dean Gerken said, there are some schools that just have no choice. They're compelled to participate in this perverse process. But much like me, when people have the privilege and the opportunity and the means and the ability to pull out of a perverse system or a system that they believe is perverse, then it can encourage others to do the same because it's not some unheard of thing anymore. It's a thing that happened. And now we're all talking about it in the news. I just wanted to let y'all know that that had happened and kind of leave it here as a little time capsule in history. If you're interested in knowing more about it, let me know below. But this is something that is big. It's a big scandal in the legal world, and it is going to kind of turn the whole thing on its head. I'm very interested to see how law schools get ranked without Yale and Harvard on the list. Like Stanford's going to be number one. You know, Harvard's not there. You'll have Columbia, Chicago, Penn, where I went, NYU. It's like, okay, I guess Penn's going to be number 4 now, girl. Like, I don't know. We'll have to see. And again, like I'm kind of see both sides on this issue. Like I have been in the position where the ranking of the law school that I was applying to and paying money to go to was very important to me. I've also been in the position where I see through the whole matrix of it all and I realize it's just some magazine deciding based on like weird shit and which school is ranked higher than which school, which doesn't make any sense. So I kind of feel like I see both sides of the issue here. Thanks for subscribing. Facts ain't defamation. Love you, mean it. Okay, bye.